Hey everybody, this is Seth from ComingOutTarot. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you haven't been here before, welcome. I'm here to chat about polyamory and tarot. If you would, please follow if you haven't already, and please share out with your friends so we can have a good conversation. Let's do a little ground setting. So I want to share a little bit about my history, then I want to talk about what polyamory is, and then in relationship to open relationships, because people tend to get them confused. And then I want to talk a little bit more about how I think tarot can help. And I invite all of your questions. First, let me tell you this story. And then I'll share with you what it means to me related to polyamory, related to the concept of open relationships, and related to how some people might confuse it with being bisexual. Because it's not that at all, though it can be. So when I was 19, 20, I think, and I was trying to understand more about who I was. I was trying to understand who I was sexually. I was trying to understand what my identity was. I was trying to understand who I wanted to date. And you're also bisexual. Perfect. Perfect, because I think between all of us here, we're going to have a better understanding of polyamorous relationships, and I hope that I'm spinning them in a positive light. So this is incredible. Yay. So I was trying to figure out all that stuff about myself. How do I want to be in a relationship? What's my identity? Am I gay? Am I queer? Am I bi? Am I straight? I don't know what I am, teenager self. And at the time, I had hey, Elvis, recently graduated from high school. I was in college. I had a girlfriend that I'd been dating since I was 16. And when I got to college, I got the opportunity to explore what it meant to be dating I was going to say a man, but really we were boys. So I started exploring what it meant to have a boyfriend. I did not take into account that I needed to be thoughtful about the girlfriend that I still had. We were physically separated from each other. She was at one college, I was at another, in two different states. I was having an experience, she was having another experience. My experience just happened to include this boy. How are you, Elvis? So what I didn't have the words for was, I do tarot cards. What I didn't have the words for was, am I in this polyamorous state? Am I in a bisexual state? Am I just really trying to discover who the fuck I am? What is this identity thing that is wrapped up in sexuality and personhood and gender and label? And it went so far as I finally shared with her that I was also dating this boy. Yes, and I wasn't being honest. I have not ever done a Ouija board. So when I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I can't do this. I need to be honest with her, because he knew that I was still dating her. So I told her, listen, I've started dating this other guy. I think I kind of want to be dating both of you. I don't know what that means. Hey, Summer, and how are you? And I didn't have the words for bisexuality or polyamory or open relationship. I didn't know what all of that could be. And I didn't have the skills or the experience to talk about it or to better understand it. So we were navigating the unknown through these three young bodies, where the girl that I had been dating, she wanted monogamy. She did not want polyamory. She did not want openness. I didn't know what I wanted, and I was trying to explore my own sexual identity at the same time. And he had identified himself already as gay, but he was willing to be open to a polyamorous relationship, not an open relationship. He had considered open relationships before, and he didn't like those. So we then went on the path of does this mean that we can be together sexually? So we tried to have a very unsuccessful threesome, and that pretty much ended everything. That was the death knell of this is not going to work for all three of us. And it also answered for me a lot of other questions. So what I discovered in that time, in my brief experience of exploring sexual identity and labels and gender identity and relationship, the types of relationships I could have, I realized for me at this time, it's something that polyamory is something I could be interested in. Openness is something I'm not interested in. And I also had decided I was going to make a sexuality choice and say, this is who I am. I understand I'm on a spectrum, but this is where I want to be. I want to be on the gayer end of the spectrum of sexuality. So once you start to identify all those things, then you're able to make more sense, I think, of polyamory, openness, bisexuality, because they're different things. So, in that vein, that's my story of trying to understand, like my like what I refer back to of trying to understand. I also have a good friend who is very open and polyamorous. He confuses people because he doesn't rely on any label. He doesn't identify as gay or queer. He's probably closer to queer. But he loves to be in love. And it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. So when I started thinking about the readings that I've done for polyamorous relationships, I rely partly on my own experience of remembering how traumatic that was to try and understand. And so what's been helpful for me is also thinking about how can I help the people who are coming to me for readings who are trying to come out as polyamorous. And part of that is ensuring that I understand, are you truly looking for a polyamorous relationship, or are you truly looking for an open relationship? Because if you can have a polyamorous relationship that is open, and then the sexuality within those relationships are what makes the sexual nature of the relationship work. The way that the relationship works is polyamory and openness or not. And I'm really simplifying. I am so oversimplifying. But just to make it something clear, there is the polyamory concept of I love multiple people. And then there is the nature of sexuality that falls underneath that and how we get along sexually. So just to keep it real, super simple. Now, an open relationship, whether you're polyamorous or not, means that you have hella good communication. Because you've decided as a couple, or if there's more of you, that your relationship is open in that, keep me on track, Lynn, keep me on track. Because if it's open, then you're saying, I want to be with you, other person or people, but I want to also explore sexually myself outside of this relationship. I want a relationship to be sexually open. Now that's one, right? You can have an open relationship that is open to love with a sexual limitation. And that's just it. The acknowledgement of feelings and the understanding of expectations and the agreement upon the controls that exist within the relationship between the participating adults allows for the emotional state to exist in a way that it can be discussed when love is present, and it can be honored when love is present, because there's a reason we get jealous. Everybody gets jealous now and then, But what's the reason you're jealous? Why are you feeling that way? And we're going to get to that in a minute. So the openness, you can decide to have open emotional relationships. You can decide to have open sexual relationships. He shares. And what if, Lynn, you want a boyfriend? Is your boyfriend, does he identify as heterosexual, and will he not participate in the relationship that you're having with the other man? Or is that like a Metamour? So he identifies as straight, and he understands you have a boyfriend. Is the boyfriend also a sexual partner or just an emotional partner? So the thing that I think is interesting is once you identify with your client, are you really talking about open relationships, or are you truly talking about polyamory, where love is present in more than one person and the relationship expands to include additional people? He can be both, as long as I'm honest with my boyfriend about having another lover. And this is what I was saying to someone else. The rules are paramount. If the agreed upon rules between the consenting adults are breached, that's when things become challenged. If they're adhered to, honored, and trusted, that's when the relationships work. But it requires so much communication, so much honesty, more than most people have been raised with or feel that they're willing to give. It is, in my experience, one of the most freeing relationships that exists, as long as you are open and honest with your communication. That's a good question. Lynn, what do you think? Is it difficult to find outside people who are okay with polyamory? So as the tarot reader, once I've determined, hey Jack, if the person I'm reading for is truly polyamorous, or if they're just open, or if they're polyamorous and open, then the next step I do, especially if they're thinking about coming out, if they're in this stage of thinking about coming out, then the conversation turns to what's the environment like? So this is a spread that I do for coming out readings. This is a spread I do for coming out readings. So no matter what you're coming out about, I have a coming out spread. And the first card is environment. What is the environment that this person sitting across from me is existing in, especially if they're talking about polyamory relationships? What's the environment look like? And does the person I'm sitting across from me agree with the environment that I'm seeing? Because if they're seeing the same kind of thing, there's at least a little bit of confirmation going on there, so we know we're on the same page. Next, I pull a card for. We pull a card, pause. He doesn't have a jealous bone in his body, but do you think he would if you broke the rule? So if you didn't tell him, if you weren't honest about one of the factors of someone that you're dating, that he, even if he knows about them, if you weren't honest about, like, let's say you were sleeping with one of the guys and you didn't tell him you were sleeping with him, would that create jealousy? Because he'd probably sense it, but wouldn't be hearing it. So once I understand the environment, then I pull another card. What's at stake? If someone is about to come out, what is truly at stake? Is it a person? Is it a relationship? Is it their life? Yep. Cool. And then the next card I pull is about the benefit. So what's at stake in this environment? What's the benefit of coming out as polyamorous? And there are so many. Lynn shared some of the benefits here, and this card that I pull gets to address some of that. For this person, here are the benefits if you come out as polyamorous. And then following that, I then get to pull a card for helper and teacher. So who's helping? Who's going to help you through? And I get to describe some characteristics of who's going to help you through. And then who's going to teach you about your polyamorousness. And you get some characteristics about who's going to teach you. So you can get some idea of where you might want to find some support. Because in all of our journeys, we need someone to help us. We need someone to guide us. We need someone to lean on and be a part of our lives so that we're not alone. And maybe that's the other person who's on this adventure. Maybe it's the second person who's on this adventure, or maybe it's someone you know who's already been down this path. But this reading helps us better understand if now is the best time to come out, or maybe another time might be. Maybe now isn't the best time. It also helps the person sitting across understand why it's so important to be able to come out about it. Because sometimes we'll sit on this stuff like, no one needs to know that. Or that's not true about me. I just, I don't need to delve into all of that, whatever that is, the polyamoriness of it. That's not me. And then you're like, well, maybe it is. And then, those things always creep back up and bubble back up. So it is, I think, powerful to talk about the why of coming out. So first, if someone's thinking about coming out as polyamorous, questions I tend to get, or you may be thinking about, are things like, I'd like to come out to my partner as polyamorous. What's the outcome if I come out to them? Or I'd like to tell my family that I'm polyamorous and that I'll have more than one partner with me at holidays. What's the outcome if I tell them? What do I need to be cautious of if I tell someone at work that I'm polyamorous? I am not polyamorous. So the fear of, or the concern of coming out is a real challenge, just as if someone were coming out about being queer or gay or lesbian or bisexual. That honesty of who we are and the hope that we're accepted for who we are is, especially in a way that isn't, ridiculed or misunderstood or laughed at or mocked or put down or judged. That kind of thing is really important when we're coming out. All of those are important when we're coming out. And having a reading about it can give you a little more insight into what's coming and what you might need to be worried about, and what you may not have to worry about. So that's part of the first part. Once someone comes to me and it's clear whether or not they're talking about openness or polyamory, and that we're definitely not talking about sexuality, like bisexuality. We're talking about the relationship and the ability to love more than one person. Now, if someone is already out as polyamorous, like Lynn, it looks like I've lost other people. It might just be you and me, Lynn. If somebody comes out as polyamorous, well, then the next thing that I like to work through are some stronger questions, because now we're really talking about the strength of the relationship and the best way that relationship can move forward. And I think this includes, in fact, because I haven't had this experience yet, but in my mind's eye, when I think about it, I think this, and I believe this includes the Metamour. So if we're in a state of polyamory, so there's, hey, big brother, there's all these relationships here, and then someone has a relationship outside of the existing rule set of polyamory, but knowing that we're going to have this open polyamorous relationship, and these two people are dating, then, and we're not in this like polyfidelity state, then this person has the opportunity to become a metamour of the other people who are already part of the polyamorous relationship. And the metamours are actually, hey Denny, are actually really fascinating to me, because it's someone who's accepted by the polyamorous group that has polyfidelity, but the Metamour is really kind of like a boyfriend or a girlfriend of one of the participating adults. And then everybody else is kind of like, yeah, you're cool. We like you. We're not opening our relationship. There may be 3 or more of us in the relationship. We're not open to somebody else joining right now. But we like you, and we'd love you for you to be around. And they become a Metamour. So they're kind of like around the relationship in a meta state. And Metamour is the love part that they continue to be loved by. For the person who was asking what we're talking about polyamory, which is the title of the scope. All right. So when someone who is in a polyamorous relationship or happens to be a Metamour comes to me for a reading, I think there are stronger questions that can be asked beyond the simple of what's thought about when you're trying to come out as polyamorous, like the environment, what's at stake, the benefits of it, helper, all of that stuff. You'd be too envious too fast. We were talking about that earlier and how the rules of the relationship help to manage that envy and that jealousy. In fact, I was reading something where someone said, pretty much, as long as love is present and the other person is helped to understand that they are loved, whatever they're going through just needs to be better understood, because the feeling is a result of something. So what is the feeling? How is that responding to what happens? You just have to get to what happened. And the way you can do that in a reading is by asking some stronger questions about shared understanding. Do we have a shared understanding, or how can we better have a shared understanding? What steps do we need to take to have a better shared understanding in our relationship? You could ask something about honesty and communication. How strong is the honesty in our relationship? How can we strengthen the communication in our relationship? So there isn't, I wouldn't say a master exists, but let me give you a different term. So masters tend to exist in bondage relationships. So there is a dom sub type of relationship where a master title might exist, and it's usually bestowed upon the master by the sub. Sometimes the master takes it if that's the way the relationship works, but usually the sub says, yes, you will be my master. In this instance, in polyamory, what you might have are hierarchies, or you might have equals. So you can have multiple loves within a relationship, and especially if you decide to have polyamorous, can be 2 people in a relationship. Polyamorous can be greater than 2 people in a relationship. And when you, as consenting adults, decide on how many people are in that polyamorous relationship, then you can either have like equal footing in the relationship, or you can have hierarchies. So if there's, let's say there are 4 or 5 people in a polyamorous relationship, the 2 original people might be the primaries. And see, that's a myth I'd like to dispel too, Denny. I understand you're being light and bringing some levity, but I want to dispel that for the polyamorous community who might actually be a little offended by that. So you could have primaries, and then there may be a secondary or a third or a fourth as people have joined in and become a part of this polyamorous relationship. And there are a lot of gay polyamorous relationships. I know of some. That are trans individuals in a relationship together who sexually identify as lesbian, and that lesbian trans couple is were thinking about being polyamorous, and they weren't quite sure. And I know, Denny, you don't mean to offend, but I want to share with you that could be taken as an offensive comment, because it lends to the idea of that polyamorous people are just out to fuck and have a good time, and they're sluts and whores and they want to sleep with whoever wanted to sleep with, but they are actually trying to have loving, caring adult relationships in a way that we don't see as traditional, whatever that means. My boyfriend and I are primary and eventually marry each other, but we'll have other relationships. Yes. And then there's the concept of polyfidelity, which is we will be, why can't I think of the word? Well, it's kind of like being married. We are going to be, this is sacred. Like the primaries are sacred. We are committed to each other. And while we will have additional loves throughout our lives, we won't let other people in to that relationship. You'll just be a part of who we are. Yes. Cool. Hey, Alisrana. Perfect. So the other things that I think are interesting is if it comes to the point of being in a state of confusion, of envy, of jealousy, of not feeling everything is all it's cracked up to be, and whether you're a Metamour, whether you're part of the polyfidelity couple, how are you? Or whether you're connected to that polyfidelous couple, you might have questions that you need to answer, hey Wayne, about not only communication, which is going to be the biggest one probably, but maybe there's questions about permission, and you need to better understand what permissions need to be addressed within the relationship. Maybe you need to understand what is behind my jealousy. If you're not sure if it's permissions, if you're not sure it's communication, if you're not sure it's about shared understanding, maybe you need to ask some deeper questions about jealousy. Why am I feeling jealous? What's behind that? What's behind the feeling of envy? What occurred that caused me to get to this place? And then you might also ask questions about, is this the outcome of a behavior choice? So maybe the hierarchies isn't working and the equals would. Maybe the equals isn't working and the hierarchies would, having the primary and the secondary. So there are so many different ways that a polyamorous couple can interact with a tarot reader to better understand not only what could be, if they define it this way, their primary relationship, but all of the relationships that are surrounding them. Because in general, what we're really talking about is not doing a reading about 5 people at once. I mean, we could. That'll take a while. But we're really talking about the person who's sitting across from the tarot reader and whichever part of that relationship or whichever person in those relationships that needs to be examined. So I think it's so powerful for polyamorous couples to reach out to tarot readers, especially ones like me, because not every tarot reader, we're all different, right? We're all human. Not everybody has the shared experience. Not everybody has the nomenclature. Not everybody has the willingness to hear who you are and where you're coming from. Thanks, Lynn. There are some tarot readers out there who can be, just like anybody else, they can be judgmental. And they're not open to a lifestyle that hasn't been exposed to them. And it can be confusing and it can feel weird and they may not have the words to express what they're working through in their reading. So this is another reason why I tell people to find out about your tarot reader, cyber stalk them, do this kind of thing, so that you better understand who you're working with. Because it's so much better to find a tarot reader who at least gets you and you vibe with, so that you can have a strong connection and have a better reading. Because if you sit down across from somebody who's like, what the fuck's polyamory? Then maybe they're not the right reader for you. They might get there. And if there's someone who's been reading for you for a while, maybe they are. And they just need a little bit of education. But I think it also goes a long way to know that your reader is like, oh, that person has been, to some degree, in my shoes. That person understands that there's such a thing as a Metamour and a primary and and polyamorous versus open versus bisexual versus all the judgment that society puts on us and all those words that society puts on us for who we are and how we choose to live and be our truest best self.